I've noticed a lot, since, we lost Charlie Kirk. I know everyone's like, again. Promise it's not completely about that, but I noticed a lot. And really, I started noticing a lot, the last couple of years before any of that really started. With all the bullshit that's been, spewing out and everything. And I think that everything that was, being put out there, I think you can tell how people really felt about it. When we saw how the last election cycle, turned out, Republicans picked up some seats in places that they, weren't expected to, and a lot of the races were closer, but I think that many people showed up for Joe and voted, and, then we turned around and they just kept running. Trump was the worst thing ever. They made him seem even worse going into this, most recent election cycle, but he still picked up, votes everywhere, and less people, no matter how you look at it, voted for the Democrats. And we got a lot more independents. We got, a lot of the moderates, because a lot of the stuff that's getting pushed and has been being pushed by the left the last couple of years. And if you're someone on the left, well, it's true. Like, look at the stuff you guys were pushing and going after. The transgender, this, that, and the other thing, just everything. A lot of people moved, I say, closer to being, at least they showed how against it, a lot of people were. And so, it didn't start just with Charlie. Obviously people saw a lot of stuff that they didn't like and started going, away from the Democrat Party, which, again, if you're on that side, be on that side. Let me know what you think. There's comments everywhere, and if you're new or, a regular listener, make sure to share it onto your socials and find the socials and share it so it gets out to more people, and everyone I know doesn't have to see me share it every 9 seconds, it feels. But, I think, especially, since recent events, a lot more people have, started coming around, and I think it was a lot of big wake-up calls in the country, with the way that went. Then, the shooting at the wedding where the person screamed "Free Palestine," the ICE facility in Dallas shooting. Like, there's been just so much crazy stuff going on. And at the same time, we're seeing, crazy numbers of schools and everything registering for chapters of Turning Point, so people are a lot, more open about everything, and they're showing, how they feel, what they believe. Apparently, church numbers are up. I know, Jesse, what are you going to talk about Jesus? Well, I'm going to say I was always talking about it, and doing it. I just said I want to start, reading everything again. That I lost all the head injuries and everything, because I lost a lot with the last big one. Just to see everything, and. But I said I wanted to do it when I was ready. And everyone said, just do it. Why? Because you're never going to be ready. And since then, I got, rear-ended. And I looked up and I laughed. I thought it was funny. Yeah. Okay, maybe I should be ready. One of those. But got a deep tissue massage. We were talking about, all that biblical stuff and the astrological stuff and, all of that. But we talked about, religion was part of the conversation we had during the process. 2 people at Walmart came up and talked to me, asked me if I wanted to join their men's group and all this. Like, it just keeps, being more prevalent. And I keep seeing it so much, more that, it is going to happen. I'm going to read it and, say what you will. I don't think it could hurt to reacquaint myself with all of it. It shouldn't, hurt at all. I do think it's funny that since I said when I'm ready, every weird thing that could happen has happened. I've had that many conversations about this stuff, but I've heard a lot of people talking about it, and, with the way things are going, it's like really, no longer left versus right. It really has been shown to be just straight good versus evil with all, the violence and people that celebrated it, which, by the way, is still fucking disgusting to go and be celebrating, an assassination like that, like you're a scumbag. Sorry, if you celebrate it, you're just ignorant. Because everyone that says, oh, he was this, he was that, like, actually watches whole entire videos. Believe it or not, the whole thing, it makes sense. Little clips that they make, that'll piss you off. But I don't know about y'all, but every time someone said Joe said something stupid, or Trump, Kamala, no matter what, I went and looked up the whole thing to see what was actually said, because then you have context. Then you know what's going on. Then you're not just a fucking just hateful, vile human being. And I think that's what spread, a lot of it. And, it hasn't been good. And I've said it before, like we have, so little, care for life, coming from a lot of things. I say it started back when they started all of the abortion rights stuff that they're always talking about and all that. Like when they've taken down, that life to dehumanize it to the point where it doesn't matter at all to a lot of people. Or they're just picking sides, so they just have to argue it. But no matter what, like, once you dehumanize dehumanize, unborn life, what the hell are the rest of us? Especially when you're calling everyone Hitler, the Gestapo, the SS, and they're still doing it, by the way, which shows you which side is, good and evil. Like Charlie got assassinated, we had vigils everywhere. People came and tried to cause chaos and mayhem of people just, having a candlelight vigil. Cut painting over and destroying, things that people built in memory, memorials. We saw that one college student, I think in Houston, got arrested for going up and just freaking out on people and assaulting people. And, if you can't even, again, you dehumanize the unborn, what the hell are the rest of us? We're just easy fodder. And, it's going to take a lot more people, to finally say enough is enough. Like, I personally went off, it was on my personal Facebook. I didn't even put it on the show's Facebook. Just how over, all of it I am. Like, no matter what, there's the nicest people I've ever known, literally just bundling everyone on the right as maggots, as we are, M-A-G-A-T-S or M-A-G-G-A-T-S. I've seen it spelled both ways, but all of us just don't matter no matter what RFK says, Trump says, anything. We don't matter. We suck. And it's just, there's nothing positive coming from a lot of it. And yes, there's scummy, shitty people on all sides. But, whenever anyone did anything the last 4 years, we called it out, but we weren't, making petty attacks. And every time you go on my socials, what do you see? What if you agree with this? You're part of the problem. I don't throw everyone in there, Mike, because not everyone agrees with the shit that's going on, whether they voted for it or not. So they're not part of the bigger problem. But again, dehumanizing us and, throwing us all under a blanket has made so much of this, just whether it's lawfare, violence, any of it, it's made it all possible because they've just dehumanized half the country, and everyone just, no matter what, whether we're part of it or not, gets thrown under a blanket and called everything. And, I'm very happy, to see at least so many people standing up since everything happened in Utah. Because I've seen a lot more people talking about, religion. We had a service, which, I did see someone, I believe it was a TikTok person. It was like, what? I was just watching it on ABC, switch it over to another one, because ABC was just had people talking the whole time. And, calling it this, that, and the other thing, I imagine. He said, I turned on Fox or whatever, he turned it on. He's like, well, they're sitting there just having prayer and doing, yes, that's what it was. It wasn't some big, Nazi rally like, the left made it out to be. But they just eat into the shit. And again, I'm very happy to see so many people, seeming to come towards, the light, or even if they're not going, to church or going, in a spiritual, holy way, but they're waking up to just how absolutely batshit everything's become. And, it hasn't been, now. It didn't just start now. It's been like a decade long plus, I'd say over a decade, honestly, because, the second you didn't agree with Obama for Obamacare or something, it was just because he was black. Like, they went immediately to the race card if we didn't agree with it. And actually, it's just because it sucked and it bankrupted us and it did nothing but hurt us, some of those things. But we didn't get the benefit of the doubt. We just started getting called racist everything then an orange man came down an escalator, and it's been off to the races since then. They've never stopped, and I'm tired. I think the more people wake up, the less they'll be able to get away with, pulling the both sides narrative. Because, there are crazy people on both sides. Duh. I'm not saying that. We didn't take shots at Joe or Kamala or any of them. We didn't assassinate any of their, young leaders, at least in the social way, like Charlie, that was inspiring people and went and talked to anybody. We didn't do any of that. We don't attack schools. And conservatives try to come and talk to them, where we have to have state troopers everywhere to protect them just to get them into the place. We don't burn cities down. Antifa attacking the federal courthouse years ago. All this stuff, it's always coming from one side. And hopefully more of them keep waking up. The more that, sooner or later something clicks. No matter, again, what side you're on. Because the only way any of this is going to go anywhere, or is going to turn around in a positive way, is, more people calling their bullshit. And that's what it's honestly going to take, is people, being brave enough to stand up and call their shit, because that's what it is. And guess what? Again, like I keep saying, that's psychotic people on either ends. And I'm not talking, politicians and all them, because there's idiots, and there's a lot of insightful idiots. If they could stop, people called them out, that would kind of help. But just call out any of them when you see it, whether it's the media, politicians, celebrities, just anyone just being vile and spewing bullshit that isn't true, just, piss people off. They need to be called out. They need to. Because there's a difference between, comedy and, trying to shift the blame onto MAGA for Charlie Kirk, like Jimmy Kimmel. And by the way, again, that wasn't a First Amendment freedom of speech issue. He said something that was a bold-faced lie. We all knew it was a lie. There was nothing jokey about it. And the networks pulled him. And one of the head of the networks, one of them, Sinclair Group, that has a bunch of affiliate stations, they sent it to the FCC. That's another story. People call that shit out. Do that. In order to get any of this shit going back in the right direction, which I think, it has been slowly, but, the attacks are so often that everyone just needs to stand up and, call it like it is on either side. And, I think we'll get a lot of it done. We could turn things around if we do that. It's just getting to the point of actually doing that. Getting enough people be like, okay, enough is enough. And I think we're slowly getting there. I think we're getting there faster than we have in a very long time. I think this is, a very big spiritual reset, or just any kind of reset, whatever you want to call it, because so many people are like, nope, no. Because you don't celebrate, Nick, the assassination of innocent people. I'm sorry, no matter what, you didn't like his words. And a lot of people saw that and realized it. And again, look at all the Turning Point chapters and everything else, church numbers, whatever, being up, because I think we finally hit the enough, we started with the enough is enough the last 4 years. This past election showed it. And recent actions, I'm pretty sure, were the galvanizing force to say, yeah, fuck this, we're over it. And that's a good thing. So I might have rambled a little bit, sorry. But it's a good thing. We needed that wake-up call. Whether you want to go to church, find God, do all that or not, or you just want to call them for being psychotic because you can all do your own thing. But, the only way to stop it is to stand up and, do all that stuff. So, I'm going to go and try to read everything at some point through the time, the Bible, Old Testament, all that stuff. I'm going to try, to get through it and read it all. I'm not saying you have to, but, continuously calling the bullshit calmly, patiently with facts, and calling people out for sucking, that's what has to be done. And, I think it would help too if, let's say bigger influencers, whether you're on TikTok or, whether you're a podcast or whether you're anything, on the right, conservative, libertarian, whatever, you might be. I think, the bigger ones, if they reached out and, helped grow the smaller ones so there was more voices, because we have way less voices. Without a doubt, we have less voices. I think that would help, raise everybody, in their numbers and their, reach, so that the message could get spread even further and reach more people. Because no matter what, if you help us, it's not going to ruin your numbers. Who they are, those people have numbers. Helping, smaller guys grow to, broaden everything so more people might have a chance isn't going to hurt anything. But, the reset, I definitely say, is here spiritually. I just feel a different energy. And again, how many people are going to come up to me and talk to me about Jesus? Or anything else, just in random conversation places. That's just, I'm taking that as the big sign. So, to each their own. Make sure, let me know what you think in the comments, because I think it's happening. I think it's been happening for a little bit. And I think it's going to keep getting, bigger, and the bigger it gets, the more light will prevail, the less craziness will be thrown down your throat, and we can at least try to fix the cluster that we live in, because it's truly a clusterfuck. You can't say anything else about it. Like, it's a scary, psychotic place. So I always do think, though, whether you call it being right, truth, the light, whatever the hell it is, it sooner or later prevails if we just keep at it, keep pushing it, and tell them we're done with your shit peacefully. Just come at them with facts and keep it going. The more that gets there, the better it is for everyone. But yeah, thanks for listening. Check out the website 2146media.com. Everything's there. I appreciate you guys. And who knows, I might be back in a few days if something else comes up, because this once a week thing, I don't know if I'm feeling so much anymore. But enjoy your weeks. Appreciate y'all. Light always prevails. We're gonna win. We just gotta stay peaceful and keep at it. Peace.